Good morning. I am Theodore Roosevelt. The White House gang had made many friends in the State War Navy building, the building you now know as the Eisenhower Executive Office Building. One day, the boys were striding down the marble-tiled corridors in a follow-your-leader game. The boys had picked up considerable amounts of mud from the garden en route to the building. After the boys entered the building, they noticed the doorman was rather annoyed that the gang was leaving muddy drip marks on the floor. As they strode through the building, a messenger was going ahead of them, poking his head through the swinging doors of offices at intervals, then coming out again and shuffling along to repeat this performance. He had been going ahead of the gang to let everyone know that the president's son, Quinton Roosevelt, was leading the group. The gang walked faster and faster, with their shoes scrunching, until they finally came to the Pennsylvania Avenue entrance. Here, as ill fortune would have it, they met a group of visitors accompanied by a guide. "That is the president's son, Quinton Roosevelt, the boy in front," said the guide, in a clearly audible voice. "You can see for yourselves from the boys he picks up to play with how democratic he is." Quinton and the gang halted. Quinton's face flushed with the struggle he was having to keep silent, being like the rest of the gang filled with anger. Quinton found it impossible to speak, chiefly no doubt because so many words were striving to tumble out, one over the other. So he remained explosively silent. And he ended by breaking into a run, with the gang following closely. The boys dashed to the seclusion of the White House gardens. They unanimously decided that something must be done about this insult. Under Quinton's direction, the boys made a quick raid on the White House to supply a hand mirror to each member. Returning to the side of the gardens, they took up strategic positions under the trees where the sunlight filtered through the leaves, and they played the shafts of light from the mirrors into the office windows of the State War Navy building along the offending corridor. Faces began to appear at windows. Clerks emerged, were seeking to ascertain the cause of the dancing lights, which were playing about on walls and desks and faces and eyes. Some window shades were drawn down, but the gang kept on with the mirrors. Soon the gang began to annoy the entire easterly side of the building. Presently, a military aide marched briskly across the garden, and the gang put the mirrors away. The aide told the gang that there would be a signal coming for them from the top of the building. A figure was silhouetted against the sky atop the building. The figure began to wigwag a color signal flag at the end of each arm. The aide spelled the message out for the gang. Slowly, carefully, as if in full appreciation of the importance of the message, it came. "You under trees. All of you. Attack on this building must immediately cease, halt, and stop. Clerks cannot work. Government business interrupted. Report without delay to me for you know what." Then a longer, impressive pause followed with Theodore Roosevelt. "I know for what very well," Quinton said, amid the deadly silence which followed. The aide suggested quietly, "The president is at his desk now, I think." "Thanks for telling me," Quinton said. "I know where to find him." The aide looked at the gang as any gentleman would look at a group of other gentlemen, somewhat younger than himself, and refrained from further suggestions. It was one of the few moments the gang gratefully remembered when a full-grown man, other than me, treated the gang with what they felt to be proper respect. The military aide who addressed the gang was Captain Archibald Butt, United States Army, my personal aide. He was the gallant officer who, by the manner of his death, had won as great a distinction as if he had met it upon the field of battle. He was a passenger aboard the ill-fated Titanic on April 14, 1912. He applied himself to a calm, heroic share in the protection and aid given to the women and children, and he perished with honor just as he had lived. "Well, goodbye, boys," Captain Butt said as he walked away. The gang formed itself as a detachment of prisoners, hemmed about by the invisible yet concrete necessity of obedience to the President of the United States. Whose idea was it? I asked with slow, deliberate gravity, which the gang had never seen before. Which idea? Quentin asked quickly. If you mean the mirrors, it was mine. What other ideas did you have in mind, Quentin Roosevelt? I asked formally. Oh, the idea of going to the State War Navy building, for instance, Quentin explained. Whose idea was that? I pursued. Mine, Quentin said briefly. Were there other ideas? I asked. Well, there's the idea of their laughing at us, Quentin said, elaborating with a complete story of the incident which had made him so angry. I listened seriously to Quentin's narrative. I know and I take for granted that you have good reason for all of this, I replied. I would like to have an expression, however, of your understanding of your rights in the corridors of the State War Navy building. Well, Quentin explained, we have more rights there than anywhere else except the White House, because it's the closest thing to us. Yes, I replied. And the next closest privileged place, as I understand it, is on the opposite side of the White House, the Treasury building. No, Quentin corrected. It ought to be, but it isn't. We don't ever go there. No? I said, surprised. Then there's something wrong about my idea of your rights. Because I certainly should think that the Treasury would be immensely better for your purposes. Think of all those bags of money, those stacks of currency, the bars of silver and gold, millions and millions of dollars that should be yours to do exactly as you choose with, because the Treasury is just across the street. Quentin looked startled. The eyes of the gang began to protrude. Golly, Quentin remarked abruptly. I wish that were true, but it isn't, of course. No, I said quietly. Of course it isn't. The gang shook their heads gravely. They wouldn't let us touch a single nickel, cried Quentin rushingly. We'd be pinched, we'd be shot, and thrown in jail. Not entirely inconceivable, I said. I guess we haven't any right in the Treasury building at all, Quentin admitted with a touch of regret. Then he added, any more than we have a right to be in the State War Navy building. That is the exact truth of the whole matter, I confirmed.